Hey guys, a lot of you have been struggling with word problems, so I thought I would explain how to solve. So I thought I would explain how to write up some equations and solve a system based on some real-life scenarios. In general, when I approach a word problem, I always do the following steps. I always first figure out what my variables are going to be and mean and represent, and then I write some equations based on those variables. Those equations are sometimes called constraints. Once I've got those equations, then I'll solve that system using any of the three methods that I've taught you, or sometimes even just guess and check. And then you look at those numbers and you see, do they make sense? Are they real? Do I have a negative amount of humans, or if I end up with a decimal amount of human beings, then I round up appropriately or down, or so on. So a couple hints that I've found along the way. One hint for determining what your variables are is that you ought to write them down, especially if the letters don't make sense. If you're using like X and Y to represent things and you're not going to know or remember at the end of the problem which one is which, it's a good idea to write them down. But then another thing that I remind you of, but another hint that I use a lot is I'll look for the question, first of all, to decide what the variables are. And since that question is almost always the last sentence, I've taken the familiar tune Skip, Skip, Skip to my Lou, and just changed it to say skip, skip, skip to the end, skip, skip, skip to the end, and so on. That is, read the last sentence first, and then go back and look at the variables. That usually is helpful to have the variables in mind before you read through some of the details. So a couple more hints. This is a biggie. Anytime you're writing equations, you're going to need as many equations as you have variables. So if there are two things you don't know, you'll have to write two equations. And then just a word about some of the different types of equations that come up. A very common type of problem is where you've got a total amount, some sort of a sentence about the total number of things, and then some other total formula where there's different values or different worths or different prices or things like that involved. So another type of problem is when you're comparing things. Typically when you're comparing two different rates, like two different cell phone plans, for instance, we'll do in a second, those equations tend to be shaped in y equals mx plus b form. There's often some sort of an initial amount or an initial fee or a monthly fee or something like that. And then there's a rate or a cost or a speed, which is usually where the m is, the slope. And then our variable is usually an amount of time or a quantity, how many times we bought something or used something. And so those equations tend to come naturally in y equals mx plus b form. So let's look at some specifics. Here's the problem. All talk cell phones cost $20 per month, and they cost 5 cents per text message. And then Best Talk costs $30 per month, and it costs 1 penny for text message. And the question, which I should have read first, by the way, the question asks, how many text messages can you send for the cost to be the same? So, since the question is asking for how many text messages, that suggests that one of our variables would be how many text messages. And then the other thing, it's not quite as obvious, but the cost is another thing that we don't know, the final cost, that is. And so that can be another variable. Since this is a scenario where I'm comparing two different rates, that suggests we use our y equals mx plus b equation. So let's assign some variables. Let's say that x is the number of text messages that we will use in a given month, and y would be the final cost, the other thing that we don't know. And so if we look at some of our common formulas here, the initial plus cost times how many that we use equals a total. That shape, that template of an equation is probably what we'll use here. So we'll write up here that template. The final cost is equal to some sort of an initial cost plus a rate times a quantity. And let's write in some values here. The all talk equation, I'll write an equation for all talks scenario, and the final cost is the thing we don't know, so that'll be our variable y. The initial amount for all talk is 20 bucks. That's how much it costs just to have the phone, even if we don't use it. The rate is 5 cents per text message, and so I'll write 5, and actually I gotta stop a second. If I just write 5 and this was in dollars, that would mean that this is in dollars as well, $5 per text message. That would be a very bad plan. I really need to write 0.05 so that I have the same units. These are both in dollars now. And the quantity is unknown. We don't know how many text messages we'll send yet, so we'll call that an X. So that is all talk's equation. Let's write an equation now for best talk, and it will be very similar. A lot of times when you're comparing rates, you're going to have these lines that are very similarly shaped. So again, we don't know our final bill yet. We do know our initial amount for best talk, that's $30. And the price for best talk is 1 cent per text message. And now I've got two equations with two variables, and I can solve these a number of different ways. We could solve it by graphing, since they're both in y equals form. We could solve it by substitution, and it wouldn't be hard to create opposite y's and solve it with elimination, a method that we'll learn next week if you haven't already learned it yet. And I'm going to use a graphing calculator to answer this. This here is the graphing calculator that I have a link to on our class website. And so let's take a minute and plug in our equations. Our first equation was y equals $20 plus 5 cents per text. And I'll change this to blue. Here we go. And that will be $30 plus 0.01, so 1 cent per text message. And I'll hit graph, and this might be pretty common for you guys as well. Sometimes when you hit graph, even though you typed everything in right, you don't see anything. That's because we haven't really talked about the window settings. So the window settings, you can adjust here at settings. The x-axis, remember x stood for number of text messages, and so I'm going to probably get rid of negative numbers. You can't send a negative amount of texts. And then in a given month, I don't send that many texts, but some of you guys I've heard can sell or send up to 10,000 texts, so maybe I'll start there and go by thousands. And then the y-axis represents money, the final cost. Again, negative numbers wouldn't make sense in this scenario, so I'll probably start off with 0. And then the maximum amount for our bills to be, well, they start at $20, and so I need to go up at least past $20 and $30 each. Maybe I'll go up to $60, and by $10 increments might be good. I'll hit graph and see if I can see the intersections. I can. In fact, looks like the intersection is way back here. So I'll go to intersection and check on these two boxes. If you're using your TI-83 for this, remember to find the intersection, you go to the Calculate menu, you hit Second Trace, find intersection, hit Enter 3 times to get it. But here, the intersection is 250, so 250 text messages is where the one plan is better than the other, and that the bill would be $32.50. That's what this Y value represents. It might be interesting to consider a third plan, which is an unlimited plan. Suppose we have another company, maybe Cool Talk, for offering a unlimited texting plan for $90, and its price per text would be 0 cents, and you could just leave it off and just write it as 90. And if I wanted to graph this in here, I'll need to adjust my money setting because this only goes up to 60. So let's go to our settings and change this to $100 probably by 10, and I'll hit graph. And now we're really comparing the Best Talk plan with the Cool Talk plan, and we see that they intersect, looks like around 6,000. To find that intersection, I need to find the intersection of the blue line and the turquoise line, and so I'll check those two, hit find intersection, and it is indeed 6,000 text messages would be how many it would take to be considered worth it to go to the unlimited plan. I encourage you to ask your parents and see what plan do you have and how much does it cost per text message, or if you have an unlimited plan, are you really taking advantage of it? And I don't suggest that you start texting more to take advantage of it, but perhaps consider dropping down to a regular plan if indeed that would save you some money. So that's all I can do for now, but tune in again, and we'll do a few other types of word problems and see how those are tackled.